The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give a couple minutes to let some last people join in the webinar. We'll start momentarily. All right, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Transitioning to Subscription. We're going to focus on Citrix's latest announcement of ending perpetual licensing and what its impact is to you. My name is Matthew Metulski. I am the CEO of thirdsctet. I spend most of my days serving our fantastic team here, as well as our great customers and partners like Citrix. I also quite enjoy hosting webinars. I'm excited to join you here today. I see a lot of familiar faces or names, I should say. So thanks for joining. Prior to my life in IT, I actually spent 4 years as a greenskeeper at a local golf course. I averaged over 100 rounds a season and managed to bring my handicap down to 8. I'm happy to hole out a par 5 with an 8 nowadays. So hence the little image of me spinning around a golf course in a golf cart. And joining me today is Mike Stelmack, Corporate Account Manager for Citrix. Good morning, Mike. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks for inviting me to this session. I appreciate being able to participate and talk about this important change for our clients today. So as Matt said, I'm Mike Stelmack. I'm a corporate account manager at Citrix. I've been at Citrix for just over 5 years. I celebrated my 5-year anniversary in July earlier this month. And it looks like Matt has pinned me as a cyclist, which is true. If you follow me on Twitter, I like to post and retweet cycling-based activities. So thanks for keeping that on point, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the 5 years. That's a good hallmark and historic achievement. So before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. This webinar will be available on demand at our website in the near future. PDF copies can also be made available. If you're interested, drop me an email. Most of you have my address. If not, it'll show up at the end of the presentation. Lastly, feel free to submit questions as we go through this. If it makes sense at the time, I'll interrupt myself or Mike, lob out the question, or we're going to reserve some time at the end for questions and answers. If we do not get to your question, we'll respond to you after the webinar as best we can. So our agenda today is quite brief. First, we're going to highlight what Citrix announced around end of perpetual licensing, which products are impacted. Second, how does this impact you and what are your options moving forward? Third, a very high level comparison of the licensing models available and the cost analysis. And of course, last but not least, as mentioned, time for questions and answers. But first, being the CEO of thirdsctet, I have to explain a little bit about us. Most of you know us as Citrix experts, yet we're more than that. At thirdsctet, we believe successful businesses are really built on happy, engaged, and collaborative employees. Employees who are able to focus on high value and deeply meaningful work. So our technology solutions focus on really removing physical place and technology as a barrier to that productivity engagement. And it allows employees to work when, where, and however they choose, minimize that time to productive, and allow them to personally define their own work-life balance. That is fundamentally how we better the world through technology. And from a solutions delivery aspect, we really focus on 4 key pillars of expertise. Digital workspaces involves the development of workspaces, such as Citrix, to suit the unique requirements around cost constraints, user experience, and increased demand. Collaboration allows efficient and effective use of communication platforms such as Microsoft 365 to enhance engagement across internal and external relationships. Hybrid cloud, as you can imagine, focuses on transforming traditional quote unquote legacy data center architectures to hybrid and multi-cloud. And last but not least, automation involves the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to really mask the repetitive tasks and surface that high value and more meaningful work. And we're really able to define these solutions using a small vendor strategy inclusive of Citrix, Microsoft, iGel, and other complementary vendors, to which we are really recognized in top partner tiers, being a Citrix Platinum Specialist, a Microsoft Gold Cloud Platform partner. As a matter of fact, we were recognized back in 2017, and I hope again next year as a Citrix Partner of the Year for Canada. And we've been nominated several times for Microsoft Awards as well. And, over the past several months, we've been extremely fortunate to aid many organizations in establishing remote work strategy, obviously due to the global pandemic. And that's really been spread across almost every vertical: financial services, legal, not-for-profit, healthcare, manufacturing, higher ed, retail, and transportation, for example. It's been an absolute privilege to serve business, the community, and our economy to alleviate stress and anxiety in this unique time. So thank you to all our clients, to our partners, and importantly, to our team. So let's get into it. In 2018, Gartner predicted that by 2020, all new entrants and 80% of historical vendors will offer subscription-based business models. And today, many vendors offer their services in a subscription model. Citrix is not the only software vendor having this conversation with their customers. And as a matter of fact, the largest transitions to subscription are represented by vendors which most of you already use. If you think about Microsoft and Microsoft 365 or Salesforce, this is nothing new. And, in light of this announcement, I think it's important to know that Citrix remains committed. And really, what does that mean, Mike?
Yeah, so appreciate that, Matt, the introduction. And I would just reiterate around your business model and sort of your go-to market. It really is relevant in today's world. I think most of us are working from home. Very few of us are in the office, and your organization is really about providing that strong, secure end user experience. So appreciate you providing that overview. So Citrix absolutely remains committed to our customers. And really, as we go through this presentation, we'll talk about how this is simply a purchasing or a buying change and not a change to our technology or fundamentally to our products. And I think that'll become more and more evident as we go through the presentation.
Great. And if we looked at the history of Citrix and the introduction of Citrix Cloud, really, subscriptions are nothing new for you guys. Citrix Cloud, which was introduced, what now, 4 years ago? That was a subscription-only service where customers transitioned their existing on-premises licenses to Citrix Cloud and were committed to a term. And if you look at the revenues that Citrix have reported, last quarter, as a matter of fact, 75% of their revenue is actually derived through subscriptions. So this is nothing new. And really, as a partner, we were made aware of this intent to accelerate their business model and end the availability of perpetual licenses, I think last year at Citrix Summit, the partner conference. And really, part of this phase transition, they made available these subscriptions, not just for Citrix Cloud, but also for the on-premises products around Citrix Workspace. And a lot of our customers, right, Mike, we saw this in March, started to see the availability of these subscription services for their on-premises investments and took advantage of that model to overcome some of the challenges we saw with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Matt. We saw organizations, my clients and clients of my peer group here at Citrix, we saw this huge need in March. One day, everybody was working in the office, and literally overnight, everyone had to be working from home. So Citrix wanted to provide a short-term, flexible licensing option. So we accelerated to market a few of our on-premise subscription products, and that was the response to the market demand and the scenario that we found ourselves in. And a lot of organizations invested in short-term, 1-year on-premise subscription offerings. And now we're coming back to those clients and saying, as you understand, this is something that's really not a near-term or a short-term challenge, and how do we extend that out over. So the timing of us announcing this in January and offering some of these products up was really sort of serendipitous based on the events that were happening globally.
Yeah, we talked a lot about, especially in early March, that we didn't know how long this would last. And so a lot of the decisions businesses made, for lack of a better term, were knee-jerk. Let's invest in a short-term subscription such that we can overcome this challenge, and we'll get a better gauge of what the pandemic will look like in 3 to 6 months. Now we're hearing our customers, they're planning for the long term, obviously, as are a lot of organizations. In now this hybrid office model, really where some organizations are bringing in staff for a week, and then there's a 2-week hiatus where everyone works from home. And what we discuss now is the utmost importance of maintaining a positive user experience in that hybrid office model. And if you come into the office and you have one experience, and then you go home and work for 2 weeks and it's a completely different experience, well, it's very disjointed. And if we want to have this sense of measuring productivity, we'll have this in-office measurement and this remote measurement. And if the experience is different, it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison of measuring productivity. So it's important businesses now look at maintaining that same experience regardless of location to, complement their hybrid office model.
Yeah, one additional thing I'll add, Matt, around this, and I know we're going to get to some of the products that are impacted by this, but just anecdotal experience of Citrix as an organization. We're HQ'd. We've got dual headquarters, one in Santa Clara, California, and the other one in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We were really ready as an organization to start going back to the office, and that was a multi-phase approach, whereby increased cleaning, sort of a rotating schedule of employees, so the appropriate social and physical distancing, and then a more sort of regular return to work at some point in the future. As you can imagine, we've really put the brakes on those plans because of the spike in COVID-19 cases in both of those territories, especially Florida. So just to reiterate, there's so much uncertainty around the timing of when things will get back to normal. So it really is important to accommodate for these scenarios, not only in the short term, but really in the medium and long terms as well.
Yeah, and it's not just, we can't just think about the businesses too, right? As a business owner, as an executive, we have to think about what the people want too. And we've been doing internal polling at Third Octet, even though we're a very small company, of do you want to actually go back to the office, right? And I think that's important. If there's fears of our staff of potential exposure, whatever, we have to take that into account into our model. And that's very important. I'm more so concerned about how my employees feel, their health and well-being, their families, Because for us, a small organization, if we were to have any potential exposure, that could potentially harm the business and obviously their families. Anyways, at the start of this month, Citrix made this announcement around ending the ability to purchase on-premises perpetual licensing for digital workspace products. And really, what does that mean? Well, starting October 1st, any digital workspace product, which includes workspace, virtual apps, virtual desktops, virtual apps and desktops, content collaboration, otherwise previously known as ShareFile, endpoint management, also previously known as Zen Mobile, hypervisor, PVS, and app layering, be no longer able to purchase these products as a perpetual license. And that means after October 1st or beginning on October 1st, these products will only be available for procurement as subscription. Now, I'm sure the first thing everyone is thinking is what happens to my existing investments? That's okay. Don't be alarmed. Your existing perpetual investments can remain as is, and you'll still be able to renew yearly maintenance or customer success services for the foreseeable future. Really, what this means is if you require additional digital workspace licensing, it will be available in subscription only, but can sit alongside your existing perpetual licenses as is. That is the importance of Citrix remaining committed to your success.
One thing I want to add here, Matt, because this is one of the biggest questions that I've had from my clients. I set out a big communication a couple weeks ago regarding this change, and people are saying, hey, what happens to my existing licenses, and can I renew maintenance? And the unequivocal answer from us is absolutely nothing happens to your existing licenses, and yes, you can renew your maintenance into perpetuity. So I want to just make that distinction and make that clear, because that's the biggest point of clarification that my clients have come back to me with.
Right. And it's also important to note that for customers who have a complement of digital workspace and networking products, or are just pure play networking products remain unaffected by this announcement. So that means ADC, SD-WAN, and related products can still be purchased in a perpetual licensing mode. So that's important to know, because I know there's a lot of customers out there with massive ADC deployments. So it's positive that these products will not be affected. Alternatively, I do believe there are subscription services for those products as well. So if that aligns with the business model and your preference for acquisition, by all means. So, I think this is kind of an interesting slide, right, Mike? Because I believe a lot of businesses are already well exposed to subscription and have been for many years. But the benefits of subscription, really?
Yeah, and so I wanted to speak to this one, and I appreciate it, and I want to be transparent about it as well. I don't think any of this here is really new. So I don't want to appear as though Citrix and Third Octet are coming to you with some sort of revolutionary ideas about the benefits of subscription, but I do want to speak to them. So one is really the lower upfront cost of entry. We're going to do some price modeling on some future slides, but really there is an inflection point. But ultimately, from an investment or a cash flow perspective, that upfront cost will be substantially lower than it would be for a perpetual license with maintenance. The second thing, and this really dovetails into that from a flexible financing perspective, is we will provide, and we do provide, the ability to have equal annualized payments. So again, from a cash flow perspective, that's spread out across a longer duration, and you can plan for that better as an organization. Third thing, simplified billing. Subscriptions, broadly speaking, offer businesses a single invoice that is all-encompassing. So historically, you've had a perpetual license and then a separate line item for maintenance. Now it's simply one line item, and that includes both the ability to leverage that technology, utilize that technology, and then call in for technical support, be eligible for product upgrades and things of that nature. And then finally, you don't have that seesaw curve of again, cash flow. Your costs are predictable. What I paid this year is likely what I will pay next year, and there's consistency across the board. From a packaging and pricing perspective, Citrix is flexible in the duration of the term related to the subscription, and it could be as small as short as 1 year, and as long as 5 years. And really around predictability, the longer you're extending into that term structure, the more obviously you're giving yourself a guaranteed cost structure in those future years. So predictability being the fourth benefit.
Thanks, Mike. So really, I always think about it as an automobile lease. I'm going to have a car, and depending on the manufacturer, I may have some maintenance included in that lease payment monthly. And I know at the end of 3 years, I have the option to move into a different model, stay in the same model, switch brands entirely. Obviously, I'm not going to switch brands. But yeah, it's the great innovation that you see in the subscription model that you're paying that year over year. At the end of the term, you renew and you get all these great additional features and have the option to move up into different models. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm a big fan of automobile leases. So as we move forward to this date of October 1st, what are your options as an existing customer or a customer potentially interested in digital workspace products? And really, it comes down to 3 options. For customers that are already invested in Citrix and wish to remain on premises and wish to remain with a perpetual licensing model, and you expect growth in the near future, plan ahead and plan to acquire additional licenses before October 1st. And this really means that, September 30th, just before the strike at midnight, those perpetual licensing options are gone for digital workspace. So this is, working with myself, the third Octet team, Mike Stelmach, or the greater Citrix team, in understanding your requirements, your growth expectations, and making that acquisition prior to that. Any comments on that, Mike?
Yeah, the one thing I will say is this is an important deadline. We're not going to be providing flexibility if you come to Citrix on October the 2nd, or October the 3rd, or November the 15th. We will not be providing options for perpetual licensing. That really is a hard drop dead date. So I think it's important to have a conversation with your client executive, with Third Octet, to make sure that you understand what those growth objectives are, what the pros and cons of investing now are, and if this still continues to be the appropriate model. But it really is a hard deadline.
And that's why we're holding this webinar at the tail end of July, to really give businesses enough time to do this planning for this deadline. The second option, and if I'm a little bit biased because I love Citrix and I love Citrix Cloud and I see the great things it does for employees and internal IT staff, but transition, right? This is taking your existing on-premises perpetual licensing model and transitioning to Citrix Cloud. In doing so, you move into a supported subscription model, obviously, but then you also reap the great benefits of Citrix Cloud. And, looking at the attendees that we have today, I know many of you have already taken advantage of Citrix Cloud. Some of you have not, and have expressed interest. But this is fundamentally the path forward. If you've heard about the great things of Citrix Cloud, the innovation hits there first. There's great features that will remain in cloud, such as analytics that really take your existing investments in Citrix and bring them to the next level to unlock immense employee experience, simplified administration and orchestration, as well as really get you closer to the concept of zero trust with the analytics and all the great security capabilities. Mike?
Yeah, what I would add to that is the transition to Citrix Cloud and Citrix Cloud more broadly is a conversation that I'm having. That's probably 65 to 70% of the conversations that I'm having with clients today. So there is huge material benefit of moving to this utility-based platform that enables you to take advantage of the latest innovation, the latest security fixes, the latest agility and engineering that we put into the product. So this is, again, a conversation that I'm having with the majority of my clients, and I recommend that you have that conversation with your client executive if you haven't had that today.
Yeah, and I think one of the hurdles historically was around cost. That transition to cloud was perceived to be expensive. Sure, there's cost savings in minimized infrastructure and the ongoing maintenance of the platform. But yesterday, I did see that expanding on the options to getting the cloud was a new service, the advanced service around virtual apps and desktops, virtual apps and virtual desktops that make it certainly more palatable to the smaller organizations to really bring down that cost of entry. So
yeah, that's absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Matt. I think Citrix recognized that when we went to market with cloud, and as we've been providing packaging options, we've been fairly rigid in terms of the options available, and we've opened that up quite substantially. You mentioned, the option of virtual apps and desktops advanced to a lower version that doesn't have all of those premium features that your organization may or may not need. And we've also broadened so that there are now concurrent licensing model options available as well. That was another big point of feedback from clients saying, I was on concurrent with my on-premise. You don't really have that as an option as I move to the cloud, and that's preventing me. We now have those flexible options available so that they're maybe a better fit for your organization.
Right. And obviously, last but not least, and this goes back to the Citrix's commitment to do nothing. Your on-premises strategy will remain supported for the foreseeable future. However, it's important to note, if you're considering adopting cloud, such as Microsoft Azure, and if you didn't hear the latest news about the broadened Citrix and Microsoft relationship and the continued excellence, they'll work together to develop joint solutions to really bolster digital workspace in the presence of Microsoft Azure. Read about that. It's great. But there are some caveats to be aware of in using traditional on-premises Citrix environments if you're thinking about moving some portion or all of it to Azure. So if you're considering this hybrid strategy, it's important to consider that transition to Citrix Cloud. Again, it's supportability. If you want to talk more in greater detail, I don't want to necessarily rob this webinar with technical support and technical architecture about a hybrid strategy. Reach out to myself, the Third Octet team, or the Citrix team to really discuss what moving digital workspace components into Azure may have on your supportability and obviously your architecture and the user experience. But yes, do nothing. Continue as is. If you're not expecting growth, you're comfortable with your perpetual model, you're comfortable with your yearly renewals, you can do nothing. Citrix will support you, as will Third Octet.
I'd add actually a fourth option as well, Matt. We've talked about the transition to the cloud. We've talked about planning ahead and pulling forward some purchases for perpetual model. Really, the fourth option is give consideration to the subscription model today because it may be, the on-premise subscription model because it actually may be financially beneficial. I've gone through a few exercise with my clients, and because of the tiered model, which we'll be talking about shortly, there are some cost benefits of moving to the subscription model today, even for the on-prem perpetual options.
What a great segue. Well, why don't we talk about those pricing tiers? So my understanding is, what I previously referred to as ELA or enterprise license agreements, that's no longer present. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes, so it is still in place until end of availability of perpetual, but on a go forward basis, so after September 30th, starting October 1st, we will be moving to this tiered model. And really what this tiered model is it takes into account your consumed quantity. And basically consumed quantity is how many licenses do I own today? And then how many do I need to add? And the simple addition of those will dictate the tier that you're in, and then that will ultimately dictate the discount. I had a client that I was speaking with a couple weeks ago. They didn't know that based on one of their parent agreements that they qualified for tier 6, and ultimately the cost of the subscription was equal to the cost of what their renewal would be on standard maintenance. I would put the big asterisk that this is not a typical scenario. So this is probably not something that the majority or very few organizations will can expect. But understanding what your consumed quantity is today, i.e. if I'm in tier 4, I own 1,200 licenses and I need to add 400 more, you'll be at a 45% discount, which is equivalent to our ELA 6 pricing, so it's quite substantial.
Thanks. So on that note, if we're to compare really what customers have been traditionally paying for a perpetual license versus what this new subscription option model will be, not an option beginning October 1st, the only path forward. We've done some preliminary calculations and apples to apples, looking at a single user device license, virtual apps and desktops premium over 3 years. And this is program SRP, US dollars, net new, no tier. So that means you're a net new client, you just want to buy maybe 5 licenses. This is what the cost comparison would be for those two models. And what that really equates to, it's a 4% savings. Not a lot, but that adds up significantly, and especially as you go through the tiers based on your volume commitment. And
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, go ahead, Mike.
What I was going to say is on a pure play basis, on a all things being equal, we're seeing, and we're not going to, I want to be transparent about how this cost modeling works. Really, the break-even point between subscription and perpetual is somewhere in that 3-year time frame. So after that 3-year time frame, the subscription model is slightly more expensive because it's more than what your previous maintenance cost would have been. But in those first 3 years, there are absolutely real cost benefit savings. So depending on amortization, depending on accounting, depending on time value of money and things of that nature, you can extend that cost benefit into subsequent years.
Right, and so if we look at, the comparison around, oops, let me go back here, sorry. Right, so now if we do a comparison of on-premises versus cloud. Now, clearly looking at this, cloud does carry a premium. Right, so the comparison of that on-prem subscription license versus a cloud subscription. Again, apples to apples, comparable versions. This is looking at program SRP, no TTU, which means we're not taking your existing assets or assuming you have no existing Citrix assets and transitioning them or trading them up to cloud. And of course, no tier reference in USD. You do pay a premium for Citrix Cloud. But again, in a lot of the cost analysis and exercises we've gone through with clients, the burden we remove from IT in managing that IT layer, the Citrix management layer, including all the studios, the databases, the licensing, et cetera, is really offset by that premium increase in cost you pay for the cloud subscription. Furthermore, it really simplifies the strategy going forward in delivering digital workspaces in a hybrid model. A lot of organizations, and we saw it heavily the past 5 months, taking advantage of cloud, right, to overcome some of the challenges with increased demand for remote work. And for one organization that was particularly interested in using Azure to do this, we spent a significant amount of time in the architecture to span it across clouds, right? Their on-premises environment to AWS and Azure. On the other hand, customers that were already invested in Citrix Cloud, it was a matter of deploying a connector into Azure or AWS, and we were immediately able to port over those workloads from on-premises to cloud, ramp up capacity, and provide remote access. That was a couple day turnover. Whereas on the other side, the traditional deployment, we spent several weeks, in a particular component, as a matter of fact, SQL replication. We don't have to necessarily worry about that stuff now in the transition to cloud. So the cost increase is offset by the administrative burden provided in that traditional deployment. Mike, any comments?
I've got a lot of comments, Matt. I mean, I would say a few things on this. One is we feel there is material value in the cloud and the platform that we're providing as a service to our clients. You no longer need to operate that environment. You no longer need to secure that environment. You no longer need to back up that environment. You no longer need to upgrade that environment. And as a result, we think there's tangible financial benefit for Citrix to take on that role for your organization. So you're going to get access to the innovation first. You're going to get access to security first, et cetera. So ultimately, yeah, we think that there's benefit. I would say in all of my client interactions, I know we've got a lot of people on the line that are existing clients, but any new clients that I'm speaking with, really cloud versus on-prem isn't a consideration. They are guiding us and saying, hey, we want a modern platform that's agile, that we don't have to worry about the operations of and the care and feeding of. We just want something that we can plug into and use to provide remote access, to provide work from home, to provide application security, and that 40% premium that's being illustrated here is not a deterrent for those clients to invest in Citrix Cloud. So I think we still need to do a bit of a better job of convincing and articulating the value to some of our existing clients, but really any net new conversations that I'm having, that my peer group is having, the other client executives, is really exclusively a cloud discussion with those new clients.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about a little bit, we always talk about work-life balance, and I think people take the lens that we're focusing on end users. Yes, we are, but we're also looking at IT. And since March, or as a matter of fact, even coming up to March, there was already concerns in the IT industry about burnout, right? We're trying to do a lot to our IT individuals to deliver value to the business. And as we say internally, anyone can deploy a server, right? It's really focusing on the innovative approaches to make a difference of what that workload does, focusing on improving user experience. So Citrix Cloud for us, as a matter of fact, all cloud and software as a service, is really appealing to that approach of work-life balance, because it removes the burden on IT to worry about components, to worry about failures. That's the stuff that keeps us IT individuals up at night. So when we leverage services delivered through Citrix Cloud and Microsoft Azure and software as a service, someone else is taking care of that worry and that burden to make sure it's available to us. And what we focus on is that employee experience. And now removing that management, the patching, the day-to-day operation of those components, we're all smart. IT people are amazingly smart and now can look at other areas in the business, such as application rationalization, compelling technologies that would provide more business value back, right? So we want to transform IT such that they're not worried about the nuts and bolts. They're worried about the best oil to put on those nuts and bolts such that they move faster. And that's really what's important about Citrix Cloud, is we're no longer burdened by the complexity of traditional on-premises deployments, and especially in light of hybrid cloud models, we don't have to worry about that integration. It is done naturally, efficiently, and effectively. So we're getting close to the tail end, and I did want to make sure there was some time available. So we gave you 3 options, plus the one that Mike threw in there, the last minute, undocumented, which is fine. Really understanding your path forward is, this PowerPoint today is all over the place. So it's important to work with, obviously, thirdsctet. We always appreciate working with clients and customers on their transition to subscription and or cloud, but we work very closely with Citrix as well. So work with ourselves, the Citrix team, understand how this transition to subscription will impact you, your current future investments, or importantly, how a transition to cloud will really revitalize your employee experience and even give back to IT such that they can shift to more innovative strategies. And I'm sure Mike more than happy to take calls, as is the rest of the Citrix team. So with that, pretty quiet group today. Not a lot of questions. Mike, did you have any questions that came in before the webinar started?
I did. I got a few questions around a few things that I thought was relevant. So the first one was, will new license keys be assigned to the customer with every annual on-premise subscription purchase? So I think it's important to understand the the technical impact that this may have, and I think a lot of people are curious about that. So this was one that kind of jumped out at me. And the answer here is yes, a new license key will be issued for net new on-premise subscription licenses and at the time of renewal. So understand that you only own the product and you only have access to use the product while you have that subscription. So a new key will be offered at the time of renewal.
Okay.
Any questions or comments on that one, Matt?
So yeah, in other words, there would be a new change window every 1 to 3 years or 5 years, depending on the term of the license, to redeploy that license file and ensure users are able to connect.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was another one that came up, really probably applies to a very small subset of users, but we still have, 1 or 2 clients on our XenApp 6.5 environments. So the question was, does on-premise subscription work with old XenApp 6.5 environments? And the answer is yes, subscription licensing does work with XenApp 6.5. This is essentially the same thing as the termed licenses that were once offered for XenApp. And specifically, there are no configuration changes needed when adding subscription licenses to an existing license server with perpetual licenses for the same product, edition, and license type. And not only so it's important to understand that for 6.5, for those 2 or 3 customers who are on that unsupported version, but for any clients acquiring new on-premise subscription licenses, understand that it will work as long as you have the same product. So virtual apps would be an example of one, the same edition. So whether you're standard, advanced, or premium, and then the same license model, whether it's concurrent or user device. So for it to be consistent, it needs to be the same license type, the same edition, and the same version or product. So and that is that applies for really how it works today with perpetual licenses. You can't mix and match on the same license server as it would going forward with on-premise subscriptions.
Okay. And a question just came in around, can we confirm again, if we stay as perpetual license for this number of licenses, we don't need to switch to subscription-based? Yes, that is correct. Only if we purchase new licenses, we switch all to subscription? I believe no, right? Because you can add additional subscription licenses that coincide and work with your perpetual. Is that correct, Mike?
That's correct. Yeah.
And does this same idea apply to content collaboration too?
It does. Yeah. So content or collaboration or share file, that idea applies as well.
Okay. And how does an org like ours, which has thousands of seats on perpetual, going forward, we're going to have both until licensing renewal comes due, or if we need to procure new seats? So this question, I believe, at renewal time, you can continue to renew your perpetual licenses as is for the foreseeable future. I have not seen anything that announces an end to renewals on perpetual licensing. And
I want to be very clear about that, Matt. There is no change to your ongoing maintenance.
right, good.
And there is no change coming that has been conceptualized. Nobody has talked about that internally. The intent is to continue to support existing on-premise customers into perpetuity.
Right. And then, of course, if they do need to procure more seats after October 1st, subscription only. So I imagine at that point you'd have your existing yearly renewal on perpetual, and then you'd also have a yearly fee if you were annualized for the subscription.
Yeah, and one thing that we are doing to provide some flexibility is, as long as the subscription term is a minimum of 1 year, we can co-term that subscription at the time of purchase. So to put it into a practical example, company ABC has a renewal date of December 31st, 2021, and they want to buy on-premise subscription licenses, and they want to buy them October 2nd, let's say. We can actually make that subscription co-termed to that December 31st, 2021 date, so that the client isn't worrying about managing multiple end dates, for one for the subscription and one for the perpetual maintenance component.
Okay. And it's interesting, these two individuals that asked those two questions, you're already in Citrix Cloud. So you're already on a subscription model. So your additional net new licenses that you may need in the future would already be in that subscription model. So that's a good point. You may be on one individual may be on an older version still. We're getting you to the new platform. So you're already in subscription. Another question just came in. How would we handle a situation where we have paid upfront for licensing, but want to now transition to subscription? Is that initial investment lost, or does some of that cost get baked into the new model? And this is important. I think a lot of people are, if we want to transition from on-prem perpetual to on-prem subscription, is there a transition program available?
Is that a question for me, Matt?
Yeah. The whole thing has a big loaded question, but yeah.
Absolutely. So that is a great question, because there is this is kind of an important answer. So there is no transition path for you from on-premise perpetual to on-premise subscription. So if I'm a virtual apps and desktops premium, or let's say I'm a virtual apps and desktops advanced customer today, perpetual license, and I want to move to virtual apps and desktops advanced subscription, there is no transition path. And for all intents and purposes, it really wouldn't be in your best interest because you'd be paying a higher rate for your subscription than you would for your maintenance. The one thing that we haven't formally announced yet, and it is still in consideration and development, is what if I'm a virtual apps and desktops advanced customer today, and on October 2nd, I want to move to virtual apps and desktops premium. So I want to trade up to a higher edition. Today, there is a gap in our packaging portfolio that does not allow you to do that, but we are developing an option such that you would have the ability to do that. So really, I'll answer the question as saying, if I want to move to the subscription model, move my existing licenses, the only way to be able to do that will be to trade up to a new or a higher edition.
Okay, or transition to cloud.
Or transition to cloud, exactly.
Right. Okay, that's all that came in from our side. Were there any other questions that you had, Mike?
No, that's everything on my side.
Well, that was great. We're on time. We're actually early. So, with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining today. If you have any questions that come up after we conclude the webinar today, my email address is there, as is Mike's, and you can call as well. My extension is 3801. Feel free to reach out, drop us a note. We'd be happy to discuss further. And of course, visit our website, thirdsctet.com. Follow us on Twitter at thirdsctet or LinkedIn. We're going to continue doing these online virtual events. And Mike, as always, great talking to you. Thanks for your insight and guidance. And yeah, I want to wish everyone a happy Wednesday, Blur's Day.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, Matt. Appreciate you including me in this.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.